So what we're up to is chapter 18, and we're looking at the second half of 18. This is the second time that we've broken a chapter in half. We broke 13 in half because it's the longest chapter in the course, some 30 pages. 18 is not one of the, it's 26 pages, so it's up there. I think there's 4 that are longer than that it is. But really the reason for breaking it in half in part was because it's so rich. This is the chapter which contains the section Beyond the Body, I Need Do Nothing, and The Little Garden. Just those 3 pieces alone are like singing a song. When you read them, that is just so incredibly beautiful. It just gets more and more beautiful as you go along. But those 3, we're going to try to dive into a little bit more. And I just couldn't have done it in the whole chapter in one time. So let's begin by looking at what I've done is on the right column at the top, and by the way, for those who are watching, these are available from our website. You just go to the website and you can download these little outlines that are here. The opening line of the section Beyond the Body in chapter 18 is, and it's one of my favorite lines in the course. You always have a bunch of favorite lines, but one of my favorite ones is, "Prepare you now for the undoing of what never was." So let's talk about that, just that first sentence a little bit. The undoing of what never was. And of course, you know what never was. The thing that never was that you never was. In the sense of the you that's not the real you. In the sense of the thing which is artificial that we create within the world. The resume and the story and the past and the drama and all the stuff that goes along with it. Of course, there's a you that you always have been that you cannot help but be. There's actually, as we get into a little bit later in the chapter, the section about the sunbeam and the sun, the wave and the ripple on the wave. It's like it talks about just this tiniest of another word that the Course uses is that there's this little splinter. It's an interesting word that uses a splinter. There's this little piece that seems to be kind of broken off from divinity, if you will. And this little piece that's broken off thinks it's everything. It thinks it's it, right? Which is also, it cherishes this identity. It fears for the loss of this identity. And yet what the Course in Miracles is saying is that the loss of this identity is your freedom. This is the way that you get to find out who you really are, not in terms of this artificial thing that got made up in space-time, which is the illusion that we all live within. So prepare you now for the undoing of what never was. We're just getting ready. And by the way, what the Course is, in part, it's a good way for us to get ready for leaving here. Now, I don't mean leaving here, I do mean leaving here in the physical sense, but, just to get the idea, there's a medieval mystic used to say, those who die before they die don't die when they die. So die now. What I mean by dying now, I'm not talking about your physical body dying, but letting go of the false sense of self that we think constitutes our reality. If we can do that, actually what the goal of the Course should really be is enlightenment. So that's where we're going. You remember the bucket list where Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman went around and looked at all the things in the world? Well, what they were doing is they were going around looking at all the things in the world, all the great sights that were in the world. What we're really doing is going inside to look at all the places that are not real so that we can remove those, so that we can actually begin to become, to have the real sight, And the Course says the light is inside you. It's not outside you, the light, right? And vision, real vision, is vision that happens inside. And so we're moving toward this. So I want to read you some other lines that from the Course that are reflective of the same idea. We begin on the left column of the first page. The self you made is not the Son of God. Therefore, this self does not exist at all. And anything it seems to do and think means nothing. It's neither good nor bad. It's unreal, and nothing more than that. And then from a lesson workbook 96. Actually, if you are doing the lessons in this year, you would have done these two lessons like last week, right? We're on 102 today. I think if you, and 101, by the way, is what the lesson 101 is based on, right? Let's look at the 96. The self you made can never be yourself, nor can yourself be split in two. See, part of the time, I think one of the things that we think is that we can live in both worlds. I mean, that we can live in the ego's world and we can live in spirit's world too. This is actually an impossibility. One of the things I want to do this next weekend is when I do the talk, seeing how the Course started here in New York City, actually 60 years ago. Helen started writing it 50 years ago, or 40 years ago rather. 50 years ago she started writing and 40 years ago it was published. And when she started doing this, I want to talk about Helen a little bit on next weekend. And because I know folks are kind of interested, and there are not very many of us that remember Helen. Helen had a highly developed spiritual side. From the time she was very, very young, when she was in her adolescent years, when a lot of adolescents are thinking about other things, right? Helen was still thinking about whether or not she really believed in God or not, or whether there was a God. Do you all know the story about Helen at Lourdes? Let me tell you the story about Helen at Lourdes. It's sort of an interesting little story. For some reason, when Helen was 14 years, her mother was at Lourdes. Now, her mother was thinking about becoming a Catholic. Thinking about becoming a Catholic. Was not a Catholic. Half Lutheran, half Jewish, actually. Just as her father was also half Jewish. Anyhow, for some reason they were in Lourdes, and they went, and they were very impressed with all the crutches and stuff around, and they were staying at a hotel. And there was a balcony on the hotel, and Helen went and stood on the balcony, and this is in the evening, and she made a deal with God. The deal was that she was going to close her eyes, and when she opened her eyes, if she saw a falling star, then she would believe. All right? She closed her eyes. She opened her eyes. She did not see a falling star. She saw a meteorite shower. So she was pretty impressed by that. Until the next day. And the next day, proprietor there told her that meteorite showers were very common that time of year in that area. And so it wasn't anything unusual. So that was God's up, God's down, But what I want to say about Helen is, and this is really true for all of us if we really think about it, Helen had a very highly developed spiritual side, very inquisitive, always, right? But she also had, and many of you know, a very highly developed ego. Now, how many of us are in the same position? Nobody you know, huh? Nobody in this room, right? Nobody at the conference next weekend either, right? I mean, both are true. So, but it's a matter of actually, as we do the work of this course, we should become more aware of the highly developed ego side, because partly the ego is going to become progressively threatened as you do this work. And we'll start realizing that the jig was up. So it's going to jab you to try to remind you that it's still there, right? At the same time, you want to be doing the work because eventually, as you know, Holy Spirit does win. And I think it's interesting. I'm convinced, as you all know, that Bill Thetford, Ken Wapnick, and even Helen the last day all had completed the atonement before they left this planet. So rather than going off and looking at all the different things that are monuments, Taj Mahals and Egyptian pyramids, we're really being called to do another kind of search, an inner search process that will enable us to see eventually the kingdom of heaven. Actually, there's a section in this particular chapter which talks about your little kingdom. Your little kingdom. But it's the little kingdom. It's like a splinter again. It's this little kingdom, this splinter, that we think is magnificent in some way, which is actually nothing else. The real magnificence comes in recognizing that we are a part of this unified mind. And that's what it is, too. It's really a unified mind. Back to finishing this, okay? So, let me read the parts at the bottom on the left column of the first page again. The self you make can never be yourself, nor can yourself be split in two and still be what it is and must forever be. A mind and body cannot both exist. Now, that's a very interesting line, isn't it? I love when you come across these lines and you read the line and you go, what? I mean, how the mind and the body cannot both exist? So let's just keep in mind that these bodies are incredibly temporal, that they only last for just a little while, out, brief candle, and it's all going to be gone. But the mind is something, again, that you actually cannot lose. When I had the experience with encephalitis and was in a coma, there was still a memory that was there. And what was interesting about it, and we'll kind of read about this later on, there was no body there. No B-O-D-Y there. There was actually at that time no real memory of a B-O-D-Y. There was no hunger, there was no thirst, there was no bodily anything. But there's something that remembers the experience, otherwise I couldn't tell you about it, right? And it was really nice. It was just very, very pleasant to be kind of aware of this mind, of which we're really all a part. But I think it's only just a shaving of it, just a little piece of it. But just to realize that it's there, that's the exciting thing, right? And I think we all do realize that there is this greater mind that we're a part of. Course is trying to get us to the point where that's the thing that we remember, that's who we really are, and not this little tiny kingdom, this little sliver, this little tiny piece that we think constitutes our reality. Finishing that, so a mind and body cannot both exist. Make no attempt to recognize the two, for one denies the other can be real. Keep in mind, the body is the ego's chosen home. And we are very, very attracted to the body. So let's talk about that for a moment, too. Several times in the Course, it uses the word attraction, and it mentions 4 different kinds of attraction. One is the attraction of God. Another is the attraction of love. In fact, that's the heading in one of the sections. I think it's in chapter 15, the attraction of God. The attraction of God, the attraction of love, and the attraction of the eternal. Those 3 phrases are all the same. I mean, they're the attraction of love, the attraction of God. It's all talking about one thing. Then there's another attraction that the Course also talks a good bit about, and that's the attraction of guilt. Okay? So we have this kind of thing that's going on inside ourselves that sometimes it may be kind of a war-like thing that's going on beside us between the attraction of, there's no war, because the Holy Spirit doesn't fight. It just sees. It just observes, right? But on guilt's part. So on the one hand, we have this great attraction toward God. Helen, at the age of 14, has this great pull, the pull to God, the attraction to God. You know, and that's inside all of us, and you can never lose that. You can bury it. You can put it so far out of the mind that it looks like it doesn't even exist at all. We can ignore it, we can repress it, we can deny its existence, but you can't get rid of it completely, right? So this is attraction. On the other hand, the attraction of guilt is very strong. And the attraction of guilt is in relationship to the body. So that we think the body's the ego's chosen home, but then think about the guilt that a lot of it has to do with the body, doesn't it? Eating, overeating, you know, satisfying the body. We think we got to satisfy the body, we got to give to the body. So we drink too much, we eat too much, anything that we do that's kind of like to be a stimulant for the body. And we think that the body is saying, I need this, I want this, I have to have this, and we give in to it. You know, we just kind of, we can go with it. The Course is trying to get us to the point that, wait a minute, there is a mind, and you are part of that mind, and this mind is a chooser, and it can decide which way we're going to go here. Again, Helen said, one of the primary purpose of the Course is to help us to become aware of the existence of the inner teacher, which is also defined in the Course. There's other words besides inner teacher: comforter, guide, mediator, healer, and teacher. And counselor, thank you. And then at the same time that's all there, and both Course and the New Testament use these same words. It's nice that they use the same terminology, right? We know about this other attraction. The attraction that keeps pulling us back into the body, keeps pulling us back into whatever it is. But we're raising our awareness to the point where we more and more are listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, and we're paying less and less attention to this pull. Actually, the attraction for guilt it's kind of a pull down. One is pulling us down. The attraction for guilt it's pulling you into the body. Right? It's pulling you in. It's saying the body is real. The body has these needs. These needs need to be fulfilled. Right? So I'm pulling it into that. On the other hand, the Holy Spirit is pulling us toward God, pulling us toward heaven, pulling us toward the eternal. The attraction for love, the attraction. We get a lot of confusion about the two. As you do this work, the attraction for God, the attraction for love, should be winning. But it's not gonna win without the attraction of guilt putting up a lot of resistance inside us. Hannah? Oh, wait, we got to do the mics otherwise. Where are the mics? We got one here, and okay, George, you want to hand it to Hannah?
Make sure that's on.
Yeah, be sure it's on. Okay. Yes, dear.
I have about 4 definitions.
Is the light on? If the light's on, it's on.
Thank you.
Right
I
to your
have
mouth.
about 4 definitions of guilt.
Okay.
Could you give us the definition, the Course definition of guilt, please?
You said you had a definition of guilt? Is that what you said?
I have a number of them flying.
Well,
into
let's
my-
share what you have, and then I'll add to
Well,
it.
guilt is that thought process that we give ourselves to allow us to do what we're going to do anyhow, or to say what we're going to say, or not do what we're not doing.
Uh-huh.
Guilt could be a propelling force to guide us towards positive action or positive thought, blah, 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 blah.
Okay. So, but the second use of guilt that you use there is actually kind of conscience,
Yes.
which is actually a word that never appears in the Course in Miracles. And I think it's interesting which words never appears. I got a list of words which never appear. One of them is conscience, because one of the reasons is that the conscience can very often be, that's not the use of guilt. That's more like the Holy Spirit speaking to us, right? In
How
which
would
case
you
it's
define
not.
guilt?
Well, guilt is this pull, this attraction toward to be me, to be separate, to be selfish, to break away, to make something my own, to not worry about, to not take concern about what's going with others. So we all know what guilt is on a feeling level. By a feeling level, I mean we all know it's really not a pleasant experience at all. If you've ever done something that hurt somebody else out of selfishness, for example, then we all know how we look at something and go, oh, it's stinky, it's awful, the sense of guilt. I hurt somebody. If you really did do something that you hurt someone, right? Like you broke a relationship up. And now you may feel like you have to break the relationship up, right? But at the same time, there's a guilt in, why did I ever go into this relationship in the first place? Yes, David, go ahead.
Well, I think traditionally guilt is we did something that we should not have, or we didn't do something that we should have. But I think in terms of the Course, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Go ahead.
essentially we feel guilty because we've killed God,
Right.
or we think we've killed God.
That's the big guilt. That's the kind of the big existential guilt. By that I mean it's as though we've split off from this mind. That's the guilt. The guilt is that we have done something in opposition to the whole being God, the whole being oneness, and which is what David's talking about. Then it hurts because I think I hurt the whole. I hurt God. Now you can't hurt God. You can't hurt the mind of God. You can't hurt wholeness, but we think that we can. And we do that by hurting some individual or in some other, whatever way. It comes out of selfishness, essentially, right? Or arrogance. I knew you were going to say something, Eric.
I think maybe the best word for me to think about it is self-centeredness. That everything on the level of the world is everything on the level of thinking about the world is from a complete self-centeredness. So it seems like it involves me and other people in the world, but it really only involves other people in the world as how it relates to me.
Right.
And what's going to happen to me, and am I going to get what I need and want?
Right. That's why I kept using the word selfishness or self-centeredness. We're pulling it into the self, whereas love, real love, which is just exactly the opposite of that, is giving. So the more we give, that's where the joy comes in. That's where the delight comes in. In recognition of the fact that actually the more you give, the more you can give, and then nothing is lost, and everything gets gained because you're really acting like God in that sense. Whereas the selfishness is the opposite of God, because we're pulling it down. We're locking it into our little selves, which also creates a sense of isolation, and again separation, which is a terrible feeling. Whereas the more we can unite the mind or give the mind back to the mind, the more we're part of that mind, the more we just naturally want to share. Remember the line from the Course, divine abstraction takes joy in sharing. And that really is the greatest joy. You can imagine what it would be like if you were alone in the world. I mean, if you were on a desert island, so to speak, alone. That would be, even if that were to happen, remember the Castaway with Tom Hanks? What happens is that you would wind up making whatever you having a relationship with whatever you could. Whether with animals, plants, or even a basketball that named Wilson that you draw a face on. Really, we have to have relationship. We have to be in relationship, right? So we will seek for that relationship. There was another hand someplace, wasn't there? Hannah.
So I just want to summarize.
Okay, good.
So guilt is that which propels us to do the separation,
That's right.
and that is what we feel or think once we have done the separation.
Right.
It serves the double purpose of that.
Right.
Thank you
Guilt
so
is this.
much.
Guilt is this. This feeling. Now let's pass the mic back to Alex here on the right. Can you, George, hand that back to him? There.
Thank you. I'm just trying to clarify.
Sure.
When we separate from God, it's a tremendously guilty experience. We completely throw everything upside down, and after a number of steps, here we are in a body, and here I am believing I'm in a body. And it's not really useful for me to say that the problem is I've separated from God because I'm so immersed in the guilt that I cannot even truthfully believe that that's the case. That the truth is that because that's why we have the lessons, that's why it's a whole journey to get back to hopefully a position where we may be able to see what the real problem is. But in the interim, we have to forgive all the little things that I go through in my daily life. Hopefully, I'll get closer and closer. But the initial severance of my relationship with God turned everything so that it's the idea that I separated from God is no longer meaningful to me. It's not meaningful, is not maybe the word. It's no longer true for me.
So the important thing is just getting back to God. Becoming aware of the fact that the separation has occurred.
And I become aware that separation is here I am, and I'm
Right.
being told, here I am.
You got a body.
And
So it looks
but-
like.
Yes, and everything, but my problem with the Course has been, is that I really, really, really believe I'm here. And how do I begin, and we can talk about, I can agree, that it's about the separation occurred with God and all that, but I'm agreeing with that notion from a deep belief that here I am believing it.
All right, I hear you. Good. Okay, hold on to that until the next person wants it. It's the second Nancy. So this is very good. I once heard Ken say, this is like an incredible line. The incredible lines is, the whole purpose of the Course is to convince you that you're not here. You're saying that you are here. We all think that we're here because we got these bodies that seem to occupy space and time. So the Course is it's a course. It's an educational system. It's a process by which we are turning that thing that got turned inside out around the other way. I think you can really kind of see it in terms of the Big Bang, because the Big Bang is like this thing that turned, there was nothing and then there was something instantaneously. But the way the Course also talks about it in terms of this, it calls it the little tick of time, right? It all happened, it literally happened in an instant. We went from nothing to everything. We went from the inside to the outside. The whole idea was that there could be an outside, that I could be outside. And now here's a really interesting line. There is nothing outside of you. That's a very important. Now don't think about your body, because it's not talking about your body. I mean, it looks like the body because we are so very identified with this object in terms of thinking that this is who we are, that the whole purpose of the Course in that standpoint is one of disidentification. We're learning to disidentify with not just the body, but the personality, but the whole idea that I could think a thought outside of the mind of God. I mean, that it can exist in some kind of reality. In reality, that can't happen. That's what the whole Course is saying. In reality, you cannot think. You do not exist outside of the mind of God. So it's a complicated process of undoing. And it's sort of amazing, that this is why it's so difficult, because it is so ingrained into us that we are these objects, this person, this body. The reversing this process, which is what the Course is all about, it's all about reversing the whole thinking process, is not going to be easy at all. That's why we got 365 lessons. That's why it takes so very, very long to engage in this process of reversing the whole thing. But we can do it. That's the exciting part. It can be done. You can slowly begin to become aware of the fact that you are spirit. That's all you are. Or another word we could use is mind, but you're our spirit, your mind, and that is all that there is. And then we're moving back home again. So much of what the Course is about, in terms of what Alex is talking about, is about remembering this truth, and then working on the process of reawakening. And when I say working, I mean, one of the words that Ken used to like to use a lot was look. Look what you're doing. Look at this insanity that's going on inside you. I mean, you got to, first of all, stop and look. When the world is not working right, relationships aren't working right, something, but stop right away. And do what one of the sections of this chapter we're looking at, I need do nothing. First of all, recognize you need do nothing. You need do nothing except stop. And then once you stop, you can begin to see that it's the doing that got you into trouble. Yeah. In fact, it's not just doing, but it's overdoing that really gets us in trouble. It's not eating, it's overeating. It's not drinking, it's overdrinking. It's when we do it into some sort of excessive point, then we start getting into trouble. So look is very important. Also, another phrase that appears a great deal in the Course, 21 times in the workbook, you'll find the phrase, search your mind. Search your mind. So rather than just kind of have this thinking that's going on, we will stop, look, search your mind. Why are you going crazy right now? Why are you allowing for this insanity? And then the other part of the Course is that if you begin to what we all need to do is to realize how incredibly insane you are. How incredibly insane we are. I hope that from time to time you've been able to stop yourself and look and say, I am really crazy. I am really insane. Because it's not until you recognize that you can begin to reverse it. And begin to go in another direction. Alex, I think Billy would like that mic, if you could pass it down to him. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. I had one of those that you would call the aha moment, where you say a word is but a symbol of a symbol. I was reading something about Helen Keller,
Yep.
She was like 6 years old when Anne Sullivan first came to her. And the first thing she did, she felt it coming, and she held Helen Keller's hand, and Helen Keller suddenly felt the light inside of her going out. In other words, I realized that she didn't know no words. She couldn't see nothing or hear nothing. So it had to be, as you would say, the light inside of her.
That's right.
So that gave me like a wow, you forget that she never learned nothing on the outside. She still knew there was something inside of her, a light that had to come out. That was my point, yeah.
I think Helen Keller is a wonderful example. If you've read much about her, and what she wrote and what she said, all came from inside, because she knew nothing about the outside, right? But she was forced to go inside and to find God. She said at one point, I thank God for my handicaps, because through them I found myself, my life, and my work and my God. What an incredible thing to say, right? I found myself, my life, my work, my God, and she, because of the handicaps, right? Veronica?
Hi. What I get from the course and from you
Is the lawn? Always be sure the light's on and hold it about 3 inches
Okay.
from your mouth.
is that in actuality, we never separated from God.
That's
we
true.
just think that we have.
That's true.
And in that split second, when we had that mad idea, came the big projection that caused the dream and the illusion
Right.
that we think we're a body, which
Exactly.
we're not. So the course is teaching us that as far as guilt goes, we are the guiltless son. Because
right.
if God created us perfect as He is, so we are perfect also because we're part of Him. So I've been doing the course like really intensely for like the last month or so, and the pages are just like coming alive as I'm doing the lessons. Like something is happening that is directly related to the lessons, and it's just like blowing me away. And I want to say one thing. I think that I experienced the holy instant. Like, every time I read that, I wonder, like, did I have that experience? I think I did, and I'm not sure. I just want to say one thing about it. I'll talk fast because it's kind of a long story. I had a really good day. I did my meditation, my reading, and I was just feeling really good and really at one. And I'm laying in my bed. My boyfriend comes in, and he says to me, I'm going to tell you something, but... And as soon as I heard that but, I knew that this was coming directly towards my ego when that but was put in there.
Right.
So he said something to me,
Butt it in.
and he was telling me about people in the building that were doing things unfair. Now my ego is like, that's not right, and it's the somebody done me wrong song, so now all of a sudden I'm in an uproar, and he's like, I knew I can't tell you anything, and now my ego's flaring. And it started to get pretty bad. Like we started saying hurtful things to each other.
Oh.
Like, well, I'm leaving, and I mean, it really, and then I went inside, and then all of a sudden this feeling came over me of, you really love this person. Like all this is meaningless.
Right.
It's meaningless. And the
Right.
fact of the matter is you've been with him for 23 years and you really love him.
Right.
So I went directly back outside and I put my hands on the back of his head and I said to him, I really love you. And everything just calmed right down. The hatred, not hatred, it wasn't hatred, but all,
The feeling, yeah.
the craziness
Yeah.
just disappeared.
Right.
And I could feel the calm come over him and come over me. And then I read the next day that when the holy instant happens, it doesn't happen to just one person. It will happen to both. So I asked him in the morning, and I said, when I put my hand on your head and said that to you, did you feel calm? And did you feel love? And he said, yes, I did. So I think maybe that was like a holy
That
instant.
sounds like very good. Well, not very much. You hold on to that until somebody else needs it. Okay. Good. And by the way, the first part of what you said was all a very good description of the whole process of the course. That's exactly the way the whole process works. Okay. Let's try to go a little bit further into this. It's not that everything we've said though is perfect. It's right on in terms of the course. So let's go over to the right-hand column. And now the concept of yourself, you see that? The concept of the self is made by you. It bears no witness to yourself at all. It is an idol made to take the place of the reality as a son of God. So we hold this thing up as an idol, and you got to really be careful about becoming like an American Idol. Because that's a very dangerous position to be in. If you think that there's some kind of reality to that, it's tough enough for us under normal circumstances, let alone to have reinforcement from the world that we're some sort of an idol, right? And then it says, the concept of the self has always been the great preoccupation of the world. Look at that, the concept of the self. The great preoccupation of the world. And everyone believes that he must find the answer in the riddle of himself. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concept. Now let's talk, this is really worth talking about, right? I mean, escape from the concept of the self. Escape from the idea that there is a me that is separate, that has its own individuality. Actually, there's a very interesting paradox, which I think I pointed out before, which is that actually, the more free you get of that, then you find that you really are an individual. Now, what I mean by that is, it's the great humanitarians in history. It's the Mahatma Gandhis and the Albert Schweitzers, and it's the ones who are the most selfless, right? The ones who are the most selfless that we look at as the greatest individuals. And yet it were the Mahatma Gandhis of the world, Martin Luther King Jr.'s, these are the ones who didn't make it about themselves. But the issue was something that was much bigger than they were. It was something that extended beyond them. They were working to heal the whole. And in healing the whole, but they were an outstanding example of what it meant to try to, and none of these guys necessarily were perfect, but they were clearly working on it, clearly moving in the direction that becomes inspirational for the rest of us. This is the kind of path that we want to follow as well. Then on the bottom of the right, I quoted Wee Woo Wee. Wee Woo Wee has got to be one of my favorite authors. He says, why are you unhappy? Because 99.9% of everything you do and everything you think and everything you say is about yourself, and there isn't one. So we have this preoccupation, but everything you think and everything you do and everything you say is about yourself, and there isn't one. It doesn't even exist. Now, I have to tell you a little bit about the story of Wee Woo Wee, just a little bit, in case you don't know who he was. His real name was Terence Gray. He was a wealthy English-Irishman who was a graduate of Oxford. He owned racehorses. One of them won the famous championship. His name was Zarathustra in 1957, the Ascot Gold Cup. He was an Egyptologist. He wrote several books on Egyptology. He kind of had done it in terms of the world, right? I mean, he kind of made all these accomplishments, externally speaking, had a mansion, all that sort of stuff, right? At the age of 63, he dropped the whole thing. He went to India, and he spent some time with Ramana Maharshi, right? You see that cartoon on page 2? This was drawn at the time that he did this. So, and I will go to the other side of the world and become a disciple of someone who looks like this. Well, if you've ever seen a picture of Ramana Maharshi, he didn't look like that at all. But that was the people of his society were making fun of him because he had done this, right? Because he realized that the answer was not to be found in the world. There are kind of two ways that one might get to realizing that the answer is not in the world. One way, which we've talked about in the past, is you have a crash and burn experience, like Neil Donald Walsh or Byron Katie. They have these crash and burn experiences. They go down to the bottom of the pit. They recognize there, having lost everything in the world. Well, he's the opposite of that in the sense that he got everything in the world, and then realized that there was nothing to the fact that he owned the most valuable racehorse that there was. Big deal, all right? So at some point, we all have to get to the point of doing this almost complete conversion experience. By complete conversion experience, I mean you still do things in the world. You still got to earn money and pay your taxes this week, and whatever else it is that you do. But at the same time, you recognize that the things that you want to go find and the things that you want to go see are not in the Taj Mahal or the pyramids, but they're inside you. And that's where the reward is. So that's where the search has got to be directed, right? Let's just go a little bit further. Okay, on page 2 now, okay? Underneath the cartoon. If you already understood the difference between truth and illusion, the atonement would have no meaning. The holy instant, the holy relationship, the Holy Spirit's teaching are all the means by which salvation is accomplished, would have no purpose. For they are all but aspects of the plan. The holy instant is, the holy relationship is, the Holy Spirit's teaching, these are all just parts of the aspects of the plan. To change your dream of fear to happy dreams. Now the fear is that God's gonna find out about us and what we've done, the way we've separated and broken ourselves off and come after us, which is not true. Begin to change to happy dreams from which you awaken easily to knowledge. Now let's stop that just a second. Knowledge is discussed in this particular chapter. It's not something that, if you get to knowledge, you're done. I mean, if you get to real knowledge. And the Course is very clear that knowledge has nothing to do with this world. It has nothing to do, certainly, with the accumulation of information. Or in fact, it's beyond words. It is so beyond words that we really can't talk about what knowledge is. But knowledge is a part of God. Knowledge is a part. Heaven, you can draw an equation. Heaven equals knowledge. Knowledge equals heaven. What we're doing, and the Course talks about this, especially in the last section of this chapter, we're engaged in a process of learning. Now, we will continue to be engaged in this process of learning until we literally have it all, until we got it. When we reach the ultimate aha, the big aha, and you're enlightened. At which point you can hang around in the body if you want to, or you may not. It kind of depends. Or you may burn out. I'll explain what I mean by burning out later on. By that I mean just sort of the light is done, right? You're done with this world. Let me finish this page and then we'll take our first break. Bottom of the left on 2. Put yourself not in charge of this, for you cannot distinguish between advance and retreat. Some of your greatest advances you have judged as failures, and some of your deepest retreats you have evaluated as success. I think we talked about this briefly last time. It may very well be that what we would call success in the world is a defeat, because now, among other things, you're somebody. You're a person, and that becomes then a bit of a trap. On the other hand, some of the things that we would call losses with regard to the world may actually be accomplishments, because what's happened is that we simply are recognizing that these are not valuable. We're distinguishing the valuable from the valueless. And by seeing that there's no value outside, we're realizing that there is value inside. And there's only one way you can do this. You've got to have this mic.
I just wanted to say that an example of that is when I lost my job 2 years ago and went through a very, very difficult period. And of course, it seemed like a retreat. And it was in terms of the world. But it was really when I got very deeply much more deeply into the Course in Miracles. And so that was definitely an advance.
Yes, that's a very good example of it. You can hold on to that until somebody needs it, or you can hold it, Eric. There are a lot of examples like that. A relationship would be another one, the loss of a relationship that you thought was very valuable and important to you. And then later on you realize that it simply opened the door for a relationship that was much better than anything you'd ever had before. I mean, you couldn't have had that relationship if the other one hadn't kind of exited first. So there's lots of examples of that. And James, we got to get you a mic.
I got it.
Oh, you got it?
About, not last month, the month before, I was talking about this guy that you actually had in your memory too, a guy who played the piano, drugged the piano around in New York.
In Central Park.
And the
Watch the
point,
square.
yeah, right. The point that you're making, kind of, he said something because I was fascinated by him. He said the greatest thing you ever do in your life, no one will ever know about it. You're the only one who will know about it.
Good line. Because it happens inside you, because it's probably a wonderful example of it, that you just are very loving. You know, that the love comes out in a very natural kind of way, whether it actually gets expressed or not, but it's the feeling of the presence of this love is the greatest thing. Yes.
Yeah, what he was talking about was the juxtapose that as the ego. You got a great athlete. He's talented in basketball. He's the greatest basketball player in the world. It's the easiest thing in the world, but he wins the championship, and that probably could have been the easiest thing in the world for him to do, and we worship that as an ego, all right? And then maybe the hardest thing in the world he could do is personal to him, might be facing something in his life that he has no strength for,
Yes.
right? So,
Good illustration.
right.
Yeah. Okay, let's look briefly on the, I just want one more line on the right of 2, the part that's in the dark print. It is no dream to love your brother as yourself, nor is your holy relationship a dream. This is the dream. This is the fantasy. All the television, all the stuff we see that is a manifestation of the world. That's the. I think I'm going to stop on. I'm not going to go to that whoever Sandy because that would take me too long. Let's take our first 10-minute break.